short, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid off somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. They're all expecting me, and that's one thing I know. My Savior pardoned me, and now I onward go. I know He'll take me through, though I am weak and poor, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Just up in glory land we'll live eternally. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their song of sweetest praise drifts back from heaven's shore, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid off somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. They're all expecting me, and that's one thing I know. My Savior pardoned me, and now I onward go. I know He'll take me through, though I am weak and poor, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Just up in glory land we'll live eternally. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their song of sweetest praise drifts back from heaven's shore, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid off
Well, we were bound to have to talk about this subject. You're not going to teach the book of Proverbs and not talk about it. So, we'll talk about it. Avoiding sexual sins, what it has to say. And I think there's a lot here to be reminded of, to be encouraged by, to encourage others in this area. I think there's nothing more powerful in our human experience than this dimension or aspect of our nature, our being, as sexual creatures. It is the most powerful probably in our human experience. Probably more people fall in this area than any other area of life. Okay, I'm talking about categories. If you're going to put categories, I think this would be one that would be near the top. And we've probably all seen that either in our own lives and people we know. And so we're so vulnerable to this, aren't we? We really are. And I don't care if we talk about young, adolescent, with hormone teenagers, or you're talking about older adults. There's not a person that's not susceptible to sexual temptation and desires and that are not in harmony with God. And you can be of the strongest faith, can't you? This is not a matter of, well, they're not spiritually strong. If they were spiritually stronger, is there anybody in the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, that comes to mind? Yeah. David, described as a man after God's own heart. I mean, find a better description of anyone, right? And yet we see that was a great downfall of him. And you're not going to say he wasn't spiritually strong, that he wasn't in tune with God spiritually. He wrote what? All the Psalms and the beautiful words that we have in a lot of the Psalms. And so this is not a matter of if we were more spiritually stronger, that we're lesser, that we're not. This can affect the strongest, the youngest to the oldest. And so I do think this is. Now, someone mentioned Solomon. The context here in Proverbs 5, 6, and 7, which is primarily where we're going to be, it's Solomon giving advice to his son. And so the principles, the application can be drawn, not just for parents talking to their children about this, but for all of us, that to be aware of this area of sexual temptation and the struggles. And I mean, we are just on the onslaught of sexual images, and it's just 24/7, isn't it, in our culture? Can you escape it completely? The only way I can think of is if you just don't own anything, don't have any TV, phone, magazines, don't walk outside your house, right? Because it's just everywhere, right? Our culture is just, and it's going to its destruction. This free love, and I can do whatever I want sexually, and there's no consequences as long as I'm happy. And we know all of that is garbage that is just destroying us. And so there is, I've said years ago when I first started teaching and preaching a little more on this subject, and I haven't done much of that here, but I will, and I'll do it from the pulpit eventually, probably this year. Have some plans to do some specific teaching in some areas. And I've warned people in advance, do not come up to me and say, Robert, I don't think you should be talking about that in the pulpit. You will get a little bit of the wrath of Robert. Where are we going to talk about it then? The kids are what? Constantly hearing it, bombarded with it. The minute we walk out of this building, it's all over. We're not going to talk about it here, right? And so we will talk about it, and we'll talk a little bit about it tonight. And so it is so critically important that we we think about this in this regard. And I just love that no matter how much difference culturally, the years have passed since the book of Proverbs was written, 4,000 years later, a father talking to his son, the same issues are still relevant for us. And so I just love that aspect, that it is still so important in this regard. Okay, let's start with just this idea, kind of the snare of sexual sin. I kind of want us to think about this for a little bit. So turn over to Proverbs 5. And who'd like to read that? Proverbs 5 and verse 3. Okay.
From the lips of an immoral woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil.
Okay, now, we're not going to talk much about this, but obviously you find this often, this immoral woman, I think some of the translations will even say strange woman. That's the idea there, is someone who's not, that you don't know, someone you don't know, someone you're not in a relationship. They're not your spouse. That's this idea of this strange woman, this adulterous woman, this seductive woman. Obviously, they had literally women of the night. They had prostitutes, and we before we pounce too hard on them, always remember that prostitution most often in times is economically driven. For most women that have engaged in prostitution, believe me, they're not out there just going, I just love to be with a bunch of men, so I think I'll do that. So lest we pounce on that, we keep that in mind. And so that doesn't justify or excuse it, but that's the setting here that Solomon is talking to his son about, that strange, seductive woman. But the application would be for any of us in any situation, for any relationships that if you will, it becomes a figure for any temptation sexually. And so he talks about that. So let me get back to what Roy just read. I was in Psalms. Psalm is not going to work. We're going to need to be in Proverbs, Robert. I need to be in Proverbs. He says, the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey. Her speech is smoother than all oil. I want to start here with, how does sexual temptation start here? What's he say?
Temptation.
Right, but what does she do? What does she say? It starts with flattery, with talk. It starts with nice words. And I think that's important that we start here, that most people don't start out and say, I'm going to go out there and have an affair today. I want to go out and commit adultery. I think what I want to do this month is cheat on my spouse. That is not how that works. I know there's some examples that you can find of people who do that and want to do that. But let me tell you where it starts. Nice, flattering words. That's where it starts. Because there's not a one of us that doesn't like what? You just said, wow, that was so, what you just said about me, that I'm handsome, that I'm smart. Flattery, right? It starts in the ears, right? And Solomon says, be careful, because that's where it starts. They're going to say something that makes you feel good. That's where you're going to be vulnerable. To be, and again, I think in terms, we often think in overt ways. I'm going to go out here, and someone wants to go out here and have an affair. That's not how it works. It starts with being made to feel good. And that starts with words and flattery. And so I want you to, it begins with someone saying something nice. Do you remember back when, I remember, if a girl would say something to you and you're like, I wonder what that means. Does she mean, your mind would be racing, or if it's a girl, a guy says something or does something, and you'd think about it all day, trying to interpret, wow, was they flirting with me? Was they, it's just the power of that, right? Just a little flirting. You don't even have to say words. I've seen people just look at each other And now they're kind of flirting with their eyes and smiling at each other. And so it may seem very innocent. And so Proverbs 6:25. Okay, so let's follow the progression. So where does it start? Starts with flattery, starts with our ears. Now where does it move to? Wow, they're nice looking. They are really nice. They are pretty. They are handsome. Wow. Now my eyes are engaged, right? And I'm noticing nice things and being attracted. And she's turning my head, so to speak, or he's turning my head. And my heart is pounding. And I want you to see that progression. This is how often this works here. And then look at Proverbs 7:18 through 21. Proverbs 7:18 through 21. Okay, so watch the progression. So we get flattery, we see, we hear, we see. Now what is this saying? We can do this. Nobody will know. It'll be hidden. It'll just be between us. It's what you'll get away with it. This is not. Again. It's not. These things don't work where someone walks up to someone, hi, you want to go to a hotel, and commit a sexual. That's not how it works. I mean, I'm sorry. It starts with what? Flattery, nice things, feelings. It starts with attractiveness, beauty. And then it moves into more overt, yes, we could get away. No one will see. No one will know. And again, I also want you to think in terms of not just physical acts of sexual, but there's the lusting in our hearts. There's the issue of pornography that we're not going to talk much about, but there's a lot of different ways too that's not just physical, committing the physical act. You understand that? Even though we're not focusing primarily on just lust, but Jesus talked about that. Before you ever commit the act, you've lusted in your heart. You've dwelt on it. You've thought about it. You've contemplated it. The sin is not in the thought or the temptation that comes. It's what you do with it. It's dwelling on it. It's focusing on it. And now it moves to planning. She says, come on, we can get away with it. Nobody will know. And so there's the snare. There's kind of the, now there may be other things. Anything else come to mind there when you think about that snare of sexual temptation there, of sin? Yeah, Barlena? The devil, yeah. He's setting these traps all over. God sees it all. God sees it all. I mean, even, it just, so I think we have to see that progression of how the snare of sexual sin works. Again, it's not like somebody just gets up and says, today I'm going to commit an affair. Yeah, Rhonda? Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I agree. Outside of people in committed marriage, the gross hooking up culture, sexual immoral, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely an aspect of that. Although it's still, statistically speaking, young people are less sexually active. All of the data shows that they're less sexually active than they were. That flies in the face. I know what you're thinking, but the research shows that is the case. And how the biggest way we know that, Rhonda, is through sexual diseases and different nature. We have factual medical evidence that backs up. But the culture of hooking up is so much worse than it was 30, 40 years ago. There's no doubt about that. And you're right, people that want to just meet up and do these things. But again, that's right, yeah. Well, certainly the lust in our heart, and yeah, yeah. Sure. Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And certainly for married people, this is, you're right, more of the track that we're kind of thinking in terms of. But again, the principle would apply. And we'll talk about ways to avoid that sexual in here. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. No, go ahead. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. Right. I was just saying, statistically speaking, kids are having less physical sexual intercourse than they were 30, 40 years ago. That's what the data says. Yeah. Yes. The sexual in your face, the blatant embracing of sexual ideas and images, absolutely is 10 times what it was when a lot of us were in school, and so there's no doubt about that. But right. But I just like to clarify that because a lot of times the older we get, we think that the generation today is so much worse. But statistically speaking, they're not in that area, actually. They are much more mindful of that actual, and that surprises us. And we got to move on. The data is there. In spite of what some of you might think, it is actually fascinating to think about that. But I'm with Jeff and you guys. This is so much more in our face, and so many different temptations for people to think about sexual images and video and pornography. Okay, let's stay moving here. All right, so let's get the clicker going. All right, let's look at some general warnings here. The first general warning I think you can see is he says the end result is bitter. Let's look at Proverbs 5 and well, we talked about that. We just read that. The lips of the adulterous woman drip honey. Her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, look here, keep reading verse 4, 5, and 6. But in the end, she is bitter as gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thought to the way of life. Her paths wander aimlessly, but she does not know it. And so Solomon says, there is no happily ever after. There is no, and this again, we're talking about our culture that is much more open about sexual and encountering and that. There is no, there's no harm in it. It's just innocent, casual sex. That's the word I was thinking about. All of that that's promoted in our culture today is just nonsense. It is destructive. It is bitter. It is for those that engage in it, and even statistically speaking, for women especially, it's there's the hooking up culture. Sounds good to a lot of folks, even feminists and females that think that they have that freedom and birth control and everything that's been invented the last 40, 50 years plus. But statistically speaking, it is hard, mentally, socially, psychologically, especially on young ladies that do the hookup culture and no strings attached, casual sex. It is very, very, very hard. So it's bitter. There's the consequences that are going to follow that are going to be devastating, and so it's the end result is bitter. Look at another thing. It says you're going to get hurt. Proverbs 6. Look at Proverbs 6, and let's do. Someone read 27 through 29. I love this verse. This is a good one. Okay, Ron. you're going to get hurt, right? That's what it's saying. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt others, we know. You're going to hurt yourself spiritually. You're going to get hurt. And I love the imagery that he gives, right? What's he say there? Can you scoop up what? And keep it to your chest, right? You ever been near a hot fire? You ever messed around with some coals and a fire? And I mean, you get a little too close. I mean, just your hand, your arm, what? Woo! Scoop it up and put it near you and see if you can not get burnt, right? And then he talks about same thing. Can a man walk on hot coals? I don't have much experience with that as far as that kind of being, but without his feet getting scorched. And no, you're going to get hurt. Sexually, this is going to be devastating. This is going to have effects, and we'll come back to that even a little bit more. And so the proverb writer says this, safe sex and casual sex and no strings attached sex and all of that, and everybody's fine. And again, the women's liberation movement that in many ways embraced the sexual revolution has been devastating for a lot of women, because it has opened them to being used and abused, and by men who are much more willing to just use women sexually to satisfy their desires and not have any kind of relationship. And so you're going to get hurt. You're going to hurt yourself. And all right, look at the next one here. The young are more susceptible. I think we understand that. The young are more susceptible. Proverbs 7, 6 and 10. Look what he says here. At the window of my house, I looked down the lattice, and I saw among the simple. I noticed among the young men a youth who had no sense. He was going down the street near her corner, walking along in the direction of her house. At twilight, as the day was fading, as the dark of the night set in, then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute with crafty intent. And so I don't know how Solomon was, but he was sitting out there and he was looking at that. He was looking at young people, and he saw the vulnerability and this being susceptible to, and again, it doesn't mean that older folks and those of us who are older are not susceptible to it, but we understand the youth are incredibly susceptible to this. They don't know by experience. There's two kinds of know. There's no knowledge. There's no by information. And our young people know a lot of information, but they don't know by experience. They think, well, I can have safe sex. I can have this, and this will protect me if something were to, but they don't know by experience what it's going to do to them. You and I who are older have seen the effects of this. And we know the destruction and the hurt that it's going to have. And so they are naive. They are simple. They are susceptible to this. And so the proverb writer talks about that. All right, let's look at a couple of the consequences. Come back to this consequences thing. First of all, the destruction of reputation. Someone read Proverbs 6:33. Okay, verse 32, a man who commits adultery has no sense. Whoever does so destroys himself. That's why I forgot to get 32 on there. And 30, no, that was my fault. Yeah, you got it right. Blows and disgrace are his lot. That's what you read. I should have added 32 on there. And shame will forever be wiped away. That's what's most chilling there, that description. The shame will never be what? Now, we can say and we can argue till the cows come home and we're blue in the face that every sin is a sin, is a sin, is a sin to God. I understand that. But that's not how the world works. You commit these sexual acts and you engage in these kind of behavior, you are going to be shamed and disgraced for a long time. And by the way, there is no erasing, so to speak, right? what young people especially share and post and video and chat about when it comes to sexual, it's a what? It's forever, a record. And, well, I erased it off my phone. I hid it. I got, well, you didn't erase it from here, you're right. But there's always a social footprint. There's also people that do background checks. You better believe they look at areas of that nature. Let's see what so-and-so has posted over the years before we hire them. Oh, we found this post, this video. What I'm saying is these things, especially in sexual areas, they will haunt us and shame us for a long, long time. And again, that's the nature of sin, in particular sins. All sin is the same, listen to me, but all sin does not have the same consequences. Anybody who thinks otherwise is fooling themselves. This sin sticks with us. And I have seen, I'm thinking of an example of a young lady years ago in a youth group that one bad decision, and guess what she got labeled and tagged for a long time. You know. And that cannot be fair because guys hook up and guys can get away at least with the reputation often, more so than girls, but she gained that reputation, and it is hard to get rid of it. Did I see a hand back here? Yeah, Matt.
The other thing to remember is anything you put on the internet is stored every night.
Right.
Every day, it's crawled is what it's called. And everything that you do online, that you post or you put on a web page, social media, whatever, it's recorded.
Yeah.
It's called the Wayback Machine. There's actually a website. You can go and you can find stuff from years ago, even from like back 1994, whenever the internet first started.
Uh-huh.
It's all there.
Yeah.
You can find it.
I know a lot of us are going, whoo, I'm glad I grew up in a time when... And that's so true. What if they'd had all this when you were growing up, some of you? Right? Videos and pictures. And I mean, it's scary. These young people especially have no idea how this stuff will stick and not be wiped away, will it? But more than that, the person who commits the adultery, the person who does the act, how many men and women have you seen that their reputation has been destroyed, maybe because of their actions sexually? And it is very, very difficult to wipe that off. Okay, let's quickly here. How about the loss of wealth? This is interesting. I find that he mentions this. Proverbs 5, 8 through 10. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to the one who is cruel. Lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich the house of another. The loss of wealth. When you engage in these things, you're going to lose. You're going to lose reputation. You're going to lose even financially. I mean, I think about when it comes particularly to married people, divorce, right? Do what? You lose half. You lose, there's all kinds of loss that happens in this regard. There's jobs, there's reputation, there's a lot here. Yeah.
There's been a lot of politicians been brought down by this.
Very powerful.
Said, like you said, they can dig it out.
Yes. How many of those have we seen? They were the front runner, they were the big name, and then, they found something 20, 30 years ago. We can say right or wrong, whether that should be fair or not. The fact is, they can find it, right? And this is even before Matt was talking about the internet. They find it, and it can be a great loss. And so Solomon here is giving a lot of truth here in this regard. There's massive consequences. It affects you in so many ways. Let me quickly here is destruction of self. I want to hit this for just a second. Where are you going? This is, it is, let me see how I want to word this. For your soul and your spirit, sexual sin can often be nearly unrecoverable. You understand what I'm saying? It can become nearly unrecoverable when you engage in that. Do you remember what Paul says in 1 Corinthians? We'll come back to Proverbs, but let me jump right to the big stuff here in the deep water. Remember what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6? I didn't put this on the slide, but so this is all bonus you're about to get now here. This is bonus from Proverbs. Listen to what he says here. I don't think we maybe have thought about this. Flee sexual immorality. All of, verse 18 of 1 Corinthians 6. All other sins a person commits are outside the body. But whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. And I'm telling you, it's more than the body he's talking about. He's talking about our souls. He says that later on when he says, when you join yourself with a prostitute, with a harlot, and he's there in the Corinth, they had these temples and they had these prostitutes, and you could go in there and worship by committing these sexual acts. He says it destroys your spirit, your soul. God made us as not just physical beings, but he created in us what? Spiritual. And there's something uniquely spiritual in this area when it comes to sexual sin. And so that's why I said, all sin is sin. Yes, I understand that biblically. But not all sin has the same consequence. And this is one area specifically that I think a lot of people have not made that connection. And so back in Proverbs, he says, this will be destructive to yourself. Proverbs 6, let me come back here. Proverbs 6 and verse 32. Let me get Proverbs 6 and verse 32. But a man, we already read this, a man who commits adultery has no sense. Whoever does so destroys himself. And you can there's similar scriptures there in Proverbs 5, in chapter 5, verse 7, that sexual sin may seem harmless, may seem innocent, may seem not a big deal, but it can change the course of your life and your soul and your emotional and your mental in ways that we have no idea. And so it's very, very serious in this regard. Produces shame. Yeah. We're not talking about not being able to be forgiven and not talking about finding God's grace and mercy and healing. Being accepting of each other who come out of backgrounds. We're not talking about the church. The church should welcome and accept all sinners of all type, but I'm saying this stuff sticks. And it is hard. And I've had many men who have said, Robert, the images that I've looked at have been now ingrained in my mind, and they are very hard to get off of my mind, my heart. And that's in the area of pornography and in other areas. And so let me quickly here we got to get these, let me give you a couple of things here. He says, don't put yourself in tempting circumstances. Proverbs 7, 6, and 9, we read that even earlier. Don't go down to her house. Don't go out. Did anybody ever say to you, your parents, nothing good happens after dark, after 10 o'clock? It's kind of like the QTs. My kids know that was, I don't want you at QT in Tulsa after, 9, 10 o'clock. Because nothing happens. When you wake up tomorrow morning, the chances are there's a story that involves QT at midnight. You think you just watch the news the next few nights. Something's going to happen at QT tonight. Nothing good happens there at 12, 1 o'clock, right?
Being on New Year's,
Yeah.
that was always a rule at our house. You could go someplace, but you stayed there till the next
Yeah.
morning if you were at a friend's house. You
Yeah.
didn't drive around at night.
And so Solomon looks at this situation and he sees these young men putting themselves in tempting situations, wandering the streets in the middle of the night. Now again, we don't have prostitutes that necessarily hanging out in the middle of the streets like in our culture, but again, the ways that sexual temptation and a lot of that will be right in our homes, a lot of that will be in our TVs, that'll be in on our phones, on our devices, where we are putting ourselves in tempting situations. Let me give you a couple of things here real quick here. I know we got a lot, but I got to cover some stuff here. Let me hold on some of the comments, questions. Let me give you a couple of rules. These are just general truths. Don't be alone with the person of the opposite gender. Doesn't matter if they're Christian or not. It is unwise to meet alone with someone that you're not married to. I'm talking specifically now of people, especially in regard to that. Without someone there, or if you can't help it, make sure you're in a broad, there's somewhere where there's people around or situations like that. So I've met with some individuals, but you want to make sure you're in an open situation and you don't put yourself in that situation. Remain accountable is an important principle. Remain accountable. I think for parents, it's know where your kids are. And for spouses, know where your spouse is. If your spouse is questioning where you're at or what you're doing, don't get mad. That's a good thing, right? Don't think that that's an accusation right out of the gate. Why do you want to know where I'm at? Why do you know who I... No, that's good. Because number one, we should be telling our spouse what? Hey, we're having a late lunch and we're going to be, or tonight I'm going to be, and we're going to be, and accountability is good.
It's also a safety thing.
It's a safety thing. Yeah, it's a safety thing. It's so important. And so it builds trust. It protects us from danger. No one is so strong enough that they don't need accountability, especially to fight off sexual temptation. And that may even be regard to your phone or your electronic devices of, hey, let me look at that. Let me make sure, and that we do need that. And so let me give you here quickly another one. Run away, boundaries, Proverbs 5 and verse 8. Again, keep it to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house. Now, do you think of an example in the Old Testament of someone who literally had to run away from Joseph, what? Remember? Mrs. Potiphar? We don't know her first name. But she set all that up and worked on him, and then finally when everything was right, she manipulated them all to be alone, and she grabbed him, and she wanted him to, and he had to just literally get out of there and flee. And she grabbed part of his garment and made up the story, of course. But boundaries are very, very good for us to have. And that may be boundaries on your phones, boundaries on your computer, boundaries on your social media, on your what you watch. There is, it's very important that we think. And then lastly, I want to say this, and boy, I'm going to come back to this when I talk a little bit next year. I'm going to do some specific teaching in a couple of specific areas, and one of them is going to be a lesson or two on marriage. And this is for the fulfillment of our sexual desires. This is where God gives us to fulfill that, is in the covenant of marriage between a man and a woman. And so there's much that the proverb writer says about drink from your own cistern. Drink from your own, draw from your own well. Be satisfied in the wife of your youth. Be satisfied in your spouse. And here's what I would say on that, just quickly here. I know I'm out of time. You got to work at that. You got to work at that, guys, ladies. Both for men and women. Ladies, your husbands, they work with some women, and they wear clothes that are attractive. They wear makeup. They're nice. They have good attitudes. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying. What I'm not saying, but what I'm saying is, if they come home to 100% the opposite every day, every night, don't be shocked when they start drifting and daydreaming. Men, your wives work with some nice, good-looking, kind, compassionate men who listen to them, And if you come home and you plop in that couch and you grunt a few words, and that's about all they get out of you every night, don't be surprised. I'm just being honest with you. Now, I'm not saying be June Cleaver every day, ladies, okay? That's not what I'm saying. With pearls and a white dress, with food on the table the minute Ward comes in, that's not. But I am saying you want to be able to, if you're going to daydream about your spouse. Give your spouse something to daydream about. When I hate the description, I hate it with a passion. We fell out of love. That's the biggest lie. You quit trying is what often is the case in those situations. You quit trying. And it's easy to come home every night and just plop on the couch and just watch TV and not work on your marriage. And you need to be out there. I don't care. Maggie and I have been married 26 years. We still go on dates. And I'm asking her out sometimes, and she's asking me out. And we're putting the kids and leaving them some money. And we did that, by the way, when they were Josh Madeline's Beckett's age. We babysitted. We found grandma. We found church moms. And we got out there, and we had time for ourselves. And it wasn't always easy, but we made time. And as you grow older in your marriage, you've got to work on that. You stay fulfilled in your spouse. And even if you never commit physical adultery, I know what some of you may be thinking, you can still have emotional affairs in your heart, in your minds, with that's not your spouse. And so we got to work at that. Be fulfilling and growing in that marriage, because that's the best antidote for that sexual temptation. And all right, now we got out of time on that, so I figured we might. That's just about it. I think I got all through I got through all the slides. So, all right, that one was I know. Well, we got to talk about it. So, yes, Bill. Don't forget to put the chairs up or down in the fellowship hall. So let's do that.